Your objective for lesson 16 is I will place whole number fractions and unit fractions between whole numbers on a number line. So we're going to be working on a number line and we're going to be working with unit fractions, but we're also going to be working with whole number fractions. And what that means is fractions that equal whole numbers. So we're going to be working with number lines that are more than between 0 and 1. We're going to be working with like between 0 and 2 and 3 and 4. So we're going to be working with those types of fractions on number lines during this lesson. Okay, so on your board, I want you to draw a number line with the endpoints 1 and 2, just like you see right here on the screen. And whenever you're ready to move on, you may push play. The last few days, we've been working with 0 and 1 as our endpoints on the number line, but now we just have 1 and 2, so where did the 0 go on our number line? Well, this number line doesn't have a 0. We can imagine that the number line would keep going on the left side where it would go from 0 to 1 and then 1 to 2, but sometimes it doesn't start at 0. Sometimes it will start at 1 or start at 2, so we're not going to be starting with a fraction that has a 0 as the numerator. So since we're at 1, our fraction has to represent 1 whole. And today we're going to be dividing this number line into fourths. So you need to take your rectangle, if you haven't already done that, and put it above your number line and make your rectangle have 4 equal sections. And whenever you're ready to move on from there, you may push play. Okay, so your number line should look like this. And normally we go ahead and we label our lines with the unit fractions. So normally we would be starting at 0, and our fraction right here would be 0/4. But this is not a 0 right here, so we're not going to be starting at 0/4. I do know that all of my fractions on this number line are going to have a denominator of 4, because each part of the number line is split into 4 equal sections. So the question I have for you is how many fourths are in one whole? And the way I want you to think about it is if I had a circle and my circle was divided into 4 equal sections, and I'm going to do that real quick to show you, then how many fourths would make this circle one whole? And we know that whenever everything is shaded in a fraction, then that shows us one whole. So if this right here is 1/4 and each section of my circle is 1/4, then how many of these fourths would make one whole where this entire circle would be shaded in? And that's the fraction that we're going to put above our 1. So if I shade in this fourth, if I shade in this next fourth, and this next fourth, and this next fourth, then my entire circle is shaded, so that represents one whole. So I know that there are 1, 2, 3, 4 different 1/4 that I shaded in. So on your number line, 1 is going to be equal to 4/4. And just like we talked about before, anytime your numerator and your denominator is the same number, that's going to represent one whole. Okay, so now all we have to do is go on and label the rest of our number line. So this next part is going to be 5/4, and then we're going to go to 6/4, and then we're going to go to 7/4, and then we're going to go to 8/4. And I want to tell you that the line right here, the fraction line that you put in between your numerator and denominator, that can also be known as a division line. So when you go over here to 4/4, you can ask yourself, what is 4 divided by 4? And we know that 4 divided by 4 is equal to 1. So we know that 4/4 is equal to 1 on the number line. And when you come over here and you divide 8 by 4, we know that 8 divided by 4 is 2. So you can see right here how these two are equal to one another. So that's also going to help you whenever you're working with a number line to put your fractions above or under the whole numbers whenever we're working with them. Just think of the fraction line as division. Okay, so what are the whole number fractions, or the fractions that are equal to 1 and 2? We know that 1 whole is equal to 4/4, and we know that 2 wholes is equal to 8/4. So 4/4 is the same point on the number line as 1 whole is, and we call those fractions equivalent fractions, or we call those, would they have equivalents in them? So how many fourths would be equivalent to or at the same point as 2, and we know that that is 8/4. Okay, so what fraction is equivalent to or at the same point as 3? So now we're going to add more to our number line, and we're going to continue on from 2, and then we're going to go to 3. And I want you to think, if you didn't have this number line to add to, and we know that the fraction line is the same thing as division, and we know that 8 divided by 4 is 2, then what you really need to be thinking to yourself right now, what can we divide 4 by that would give us 3? And that's going to be the fraction that goes right here underneath the 3 on the number line. So I want you to add more to your number line and finish filling in the fractions and see what fraction is going to be the same as 3 wholes. And whenever you're ready to check that, you may push play. Okay, so when we keep adding to the number line, we go 9/4, 10/4, 11/4, and then 12/4. And if you're thinking that if you divide 12 divided by 4, you get 3, then you are correct. So the fraction that is equal to 3 wholes is 12/4 on this number line. Okay, so now we're going to make a new number line. So if you want to clear off your board and get ready to move on to a new number line, you can do that now. If you need to push pause, then do that. Okay, so on your number line, you need to draw it, and the first endpoint is going to be 2, and the last endpoint is going to be 3, and then right directly in the middle, you need to put the missing number that would come between 2 and 3, which we know is, 2 and 4, and we know that that number is 3. And this time, each part of the number line, so between 2 and 3, and then between 3 and 4, we're going to have 3 equal parts. So you also need to, if you want it, you don't have to have the rectangle, but if you want to put the rectangle above your line, you can do that to make sure you have 3 equal sections. And then whenever you're ready to move on to fill in some fractions on your number lines after you have 3 equal parts, you can push play. Okay, so your number line should look like this, where each section between the whole numbers have 3 equal parts. So here's 1 part, 2 parts, 3 parts, and then between 3 and 4, I have 1 part, 2 part, and 3 parts. So this time we're once again not starting at 0 on the number line, but we're also not starting at 1 whole. We're starting at 2 wholes, so you know that we're working with a fraction that's going to have a denominator of 3, but what you have to ask yourself is how many thirds are equivalent to 2 wholes, or how many thirds would equal 2 wholes. So one way you can think of it, once again, is thinking of it as fractions. So if I have 2 wholes, and I've got 2 rectangles, I know that each rectangle has 3 equal parts. And I know that in order for it to be 2 wholes, that both of these rectangles need to be completely shaded in. I know that each part on the rectangle is 1/3, so I'm going to label this 1/3. And whenever I have shaded in all of the fractions, all I have to do is count how many thirds I shaded in, and that will tell me how many thirds are equal to 2 wholes. So now that I have all of this labeled, all I'm going to do is shade it in. Here is 1 whole shaded, and here is the other whole shaded in. So now that I have two holes shaded in, all I need to do is count my unit fractions and see how many thirds there were. And if I have 3 right here, and if I have 3 right here, I know that that is equal to 6. So 2 thirds is equal to, or not 2 thirds, but 2 wholes is equal to 6 thirds. And once again, if you don't want to draw these models to figure it out, then all you have to do is ask yourself, what could I have divided 3 by to give me 2, and that would have been your numerator. So now that I'm starting at 6 thirds, you're going to, on your number line, finish filling in the fractions for all of the tick marks, and we're going to see what 3 wholes and what 4 wholes is equal to. So go ahead and finish filling in your number line and push play when you're ready to move on. Okay, so this is what your number line should look like. We go from 6 thirds to 7 thirds, 8 thirds, 9 thirds, 10 thirds, 11 thirds, and 12 thirds. We know that 3 wholes is equal to 9 thirds. Once again, when you're asking yourself 9 divided by 3, we know that 9 divided by 3 is equal to 3, so that tells me that these two, this number and this fraction are equal to one another. I know that whenever I divide 12 and 3 together, that's equal to 4. So just remember that that fraction line can also be known as division, and that's going to help you on number lines like this and trying to figure out what fraction goes with the whole number. But you really have to know how many parts are in each section of the number line, because that's going to tell you what your denominator is. You're not going to know what to divide with if you don't know what your denominator is. So you really have to pay attention to how many parts are on the number line to help you divide. Okay, now we're going to be working with a new number line. So if you want to clear off your board and make your new number line have the endpoints of 3 and 6, and we know that 4 and 5 come between those. So your number line is going to look like mine does on the screen. So if you want to get that ready on your board and then push play whenever you're ready to move on, go ahead and do that now. Okay, so for each section or for each hole or for each part on your number line, you're going to make it into halves. So all you have to do is just draw a line right in the middle of 3 and 4, draw a line right in the middle of 4 and 5, and draw a line right in the middle of 5 and 6. So we know that the fractions that we're working with today are going to have a denominator of 2, because each section of my number line between 3 and 4 and between 4 and 5 and between 5 and 6 has 2 parts, so our denominator is going to be 2. So since we're starting with 3, you have to ask yourself how many halves are going to be in 3 wholes. So once again, you could think of it with a model. I've got 2 rectangles, or I'm sorry, not 2 rectangles, but 3, since I'm working with 3 holes. Each rectangle has 2 different parts because we're working with halves. And I know that each part of the rectangle is 1/2, so those are my unit fractions. This is 1/2, the other part is 1/2. And all of the other parts, I'm just going to draw an arrow down, are also 1/2. So if I were to shade in all of these parts all together for each rectangle to make 3 holes, then I would have to ask myself how many halves did I shade in all together. And I know that here's 2 halves, 4 halves, and 6 halves. So I know that the fraction that is equal to 3 holes is 6 halves. And once again, all you had to do was ask yourself, what could I divide 2 by to give myself 3? And we know that 6 divided by 2 is 3. So that's another way to give you your fraction for what was equal to 3 wholes. Now it says to determine the fractions for each whole. So we have to figure out what fraction is going to be 4 wholes, what fraction is going to be 5 wholes, and what fraction is going to be 6 wholes. And then it says box those. So you're going to just draw a rectangle or a circle around the fractions that go with 4 holes, 5 holes, and 6 holes. And then you're also still going to label the fractions that are in between each whole number on your number line as well. So all you're pretty much doing right now is finishing this number line, labeling each fraction for each tick mark on the number line, and then just drawing a box around the fractions that are equal to 4, 5, and 6. So whenever you're ready to move on and check your answers, you may push play. Okay, so Your number line should look like this. We went from 6 halves to 7 halves, 8 halves, 9 halves, 10 halves, 11 halves, and 12 halves. I know that 4 wholes is equal to 8 halves because I know that 8 divided by 2 is equal to 4. And if I drew another hole for this rectangle where I had 4 holes, then I would have 8 different halves that I shaded in. I know that 5 halves is, or 10 halves is equal to 5, and 12 halves is equal to 6. And think about that fraction line as division. 10 divided by 2 is 5, and 12 divided by 2 is 6. So now we're going to move on to the problem set. So if you want to get that out and get that ready and push play whenever you're ready to start on it. Okay, so it says estimate to equally partition and label the fractions on the number line. Label the wholes as fractions and box them. The first one is done for you. So they're putting their fractions above the number line, so that's where you're going to need to be putting yours today. We normally put them at the bottom of the number line or underneath the number line, but today we're just going to put them up at the top because that's where they left the room for you to write. And we cannot forget that we have to box in the whole number fractions. So where you see a whole number on your number line, you're going to be boxing those fractions in so we know what fraction is equal to that whole number. And over here next to each number line, you see halves and thirds and halves and fourths. So each part of your number line needs to be divided into these certain sections. So you got to pay attention to that whenever you're working on this. So the first one's done for us. So for part B, we're going to have our number line have 3 equal parts, and I'm going to do this without a rectangle. Now my number line has 3 equal parts, so I know that each fraction that I'm working with is going to have a denominator of 3. So I'm going to go ahead and make that on my number line, and then I'm going to fill in what my numerators will be. That's it. Hold on. So we've got to ask ourselves how many thirds are in one whole, and when we've talked about this before, we know that whenever we have one whole, the numerator and the denominator are the same number. So I know that 3 thirds is going to give me 1 whole, and then the next one is going to be 4 thirds, and we're going to go to 5 thirds, and then we've got 6 thirds because 6 thirds is actually equal to 2 wholes. That's me saying if I had 2 pizzas, and each pizza was cut into 3 slices. I've got 3 slices in the first pizza and 3 slices in the second pizza, and whenever I know I have 3 and 3 together, that gives me 6. So 6 thirds is equal to 2 wholes. Okay, now we're going to move on to C. This number line needs to have halves, so each section is going to be broken up into 2 different parts, and we need to draw a box around the whole numbers because that's where we have to put in our fractions. So we need to have a rectangle around 2 and above 3 and above 4 because that's where we are going to box in our fractions for the whole numbers. I need to make this bigger. Okay. So this time we're starting at 2 and not at 0 and not at 1. So once again we know our denominator is going to be 2 because we're working with halves on this number line. So you have to ask yourself how many halves are going to be in 2 wholes. And since our denominator is 2, you can also ask yourself what can I divide 2 by to give me 2. And I know that that answer is going to be 4 because if I were to draw a circle in my circle, or if I were to draw a rectangle, not a circle, and my rectangles were to have 2 equal parts, and I know that each part is halves, and I were to shade in all of both of these rectangles, that would be 1 half, 2 halves, 3 halves, and 4 halves. So that's how I get 4 halves as equal to 2. Now all I have to do is go in and just fill in the rest of my number line. And I see that 3 wholes is equal to 6 halves, and I see that 4 wholes is equal to 8 halves. Okay, so for D, this number line needs to be divided into 4 equal parts, so you need to make your number line have 4 equal parts. Mine aren't very equal, so I'm going to have to move my lines just a little bit to make them more equal. And then the second part of your number line also needs to have 4 equal parts. And as you can see right here, they're missing a whole number right here in the middle. They go from 3 to 5, so we know that the whole number that comes between 3 and 5 is 4. And then once again, we need to put a box over 3, and we need to put a box over 4, and we need to put a box over 5, because those are going to be the fractions that are equal to the whole numbers. Since this number line is divided into fourths, we need to have a denominator of 4 on each one of the parts of the number line, so make sure you're putting that on your paper. And then we've got to figure out what fraction is going to be equal to 3 wholes. So you have to ask yourself how many fourths are in 3 wholes. If you drew some rectangles or some circles, and you drew 3 of those and divided each one into fourths and then shaded all of those, you would have seen that you shaded in 12 different fourths to give yourself 3 wholes. And then we go from 12 fourths to 13 fourths, 14 fourths, 15 fourths, 16 fourths is equal to 4 wholes, and then we go from 17 fourths, 18 fourths, 19 fourths, and then 20 fourths is equal to 5 wholes. And you can check it by saying, what is 16 divided by 4? And we know that that's equal to 4. And we know that 20 divided by 4 is equal to 5, so that tells us that our fractions are right on our number line. Okay, now we're going from 6 all the way to 9. So we definitely have some whole numbers to fill in. So I know I'm going to have to fill in a 7, and I know I'm going to have to fill in an 8. So I'm going to put my whole number 7, and then I'm going to put my whole number 8 on my number line. And then each section of the number line has to be divided into thirds. So go ahead and do that if you haven't already done that on your paper. And then we need to put a box over our whole numbers, so that way we know what fractions are equal to the whole numbers on our number line. Since this number line is divided into thirds, all of your denominators for all of your fractions are going to be 3. And we have to ask ourselves how many thirds are in 6 wholes. So you could have drawn 6 different circles or 6 different rectangles and divided those circles or rectangles into thirds, and then shaded in all of the parts to see how many thirds there were in all when you have it 6 different wholes that you're working with. And in this case, we have 18 different parts that you would have shaded in, because I know that 18 divided by 3 is 6. So now we're going to go to 19 thirds as the next one on our number line. Then we're going to go to 20 thirds. And then 7 wholes is equal to 21 thirds. And then we're going to go to 22 thirds. And then we're going to go to 23 thirds. And then 8 wholes is equal to 24 thirds, because I know that 24 divided by 3 is 8. And then we got 25 thirds, 26 thirds, and then 9 wholes is equal to 27 thirds, because I know that 27 divided by 3 is 9. So now we're ready to move on to the back side. It says partition each whole into fifths, label each fraction, count up as you go, and box the fractions that are located at the same points as whole numbers. So we're doing exactly what we did on the front side. It's just all the whole numbers are there for you. You've got to still box it in above the whole numbers, and it tells you exactly how many parts each section or each whole on your number line needs to be. And we know that when we're going from 0 to 1, that is a whole on the number line, and when we're going from 1 to 2, that's a whole on the number line. So it said partition each whole into fifths, so each section of your number line is going to have 5 equal parts, so you need to have that on your paper. And then from 1 to 2, we're also going to have 5 equal parts. So that tells us that each fraction that we're writing on our number line is going to have a denominator of 5. right here we are actually starting at 0, and we haven't done that on this lesson so far today, so we're actually starting at an easy point because we know that the fraction at 0 is going to be 0/5, because if our fraction is, or if our whole number is 0, then we haven't shaded anything on our whole yet. So I'm going to go from 0/5, and I'm going to go from 1/5 to 2/5 to 3/5, and then 4/5. And we know that 1 whole is equal to 5/5, because we know that with 1 whole, our numerator and denominator is the same number. So we're going to go to 6/5, 7/5, 8/5, 9/5, and then 2 wholes is equal to 10/5, because if I had 2 circles or 2 rectangles and they were divided into 5 equal parts, and I shaded in both of those rectangles, then I would have shaded in 10 equal parts, so I know that 10/5 is equal to 2 wholes. I also know that 10 divided by 5 is 2. Okay, number 3 says partition each whole into thirds, so now our number line between each whole number is going to have 3 equal parts. And since we are partitioning these into 3 equal parts, I know that my fractions are going to have a denominator of 3. It also says that you need to box in above each whole number so we know what fraction is equal to each whole number. And go ahead and, if you haven't already done that, finish filling in the fractions on your number line. Okay, so we know that 1 whole is equal to 3/3, and then we go from 4/3, 5/3, 2 wholes is equal to 6/3, and then we've got 7/3, 8/3, 3 wholes is equal to 9/3, and then we go from 10/3 to 11/3, and 4 wholes is equal to 12/3. So number 4 says draw a number line with the endpoints as 0 and 3. So we know that in between there, there's also going to have to be a 1 and a 2. So all of your wholes are going to be 0, 1, 2, and 3. Each different whole on your number line, or in between each different whole number, is going to have 4 equal parts. And then all of the fractions are going to have to be labeled on your number line. You still have to box in the fractions that are equal to the whole numbers like we've done on every other number line on this paper. And it says use a separate sheet of paper if you need more space, but you really shouldn't need more space to do this one. So you can check your answer with mine once I have it drawn on here. Okay, so your number line would have looked like this. You started at 0. You should have had 1, 2, and 3 on your number line, and those needed to be equally spaced out. And then between 0 and 1, and 1 and 2, and 2 and 3, you should have had 4 equal sections. So that told us that our denominator on all of our fractions is going to be 4. Since we started at 0, we started out with an easy fraction of 0/4, and then we went all the way up to 12/4. So 1 whole is equal to 4/4, 2 wholes is equal to 8/4, and 3 wholes is equal to 12/4. So now you're going to be ready for the exit slip. Whenever you're finished with it, you can bring that to me so we can check it.